I've determined that Journey's going to have 1,000 locations, and it's because I know what that truly means. It's going to be 5,000 to 8,000 coaches, because there's 5 to 8 in each location, 5 to 8,000, an army of coaches waking up every day to go change lives, waking up every day to go change lives.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Champion Life podcast. I'm excited about today's episode as I am with one of my friends, a gentleman that I've got the opportunity to get to know over this past year. And man, am I excited. This guy is an incredible husband, father, leader, not just in the fitness industry, but just in life in general. And he has an incredible story that today I'm saying, how do you go from spending 10 years in prison to working on owning 10 franchises? Incredible. So without further ado, please help me welcome my good friend, Travis Barnes, to the podcast. Travis, welcome, brother. How you doing, man?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Wow, that was quite an introduction. Thank you for the honor of being on this show today. Appreciate it.
Dude, I'm super pumped to have you, brother. I'm super pumped to get to spend the next 45 minutes with you, share you with our audience, because, this podcast, as you know, I created it for one reason, man, and that is to give people hope, to encourage people, to let them know that this, what I like to call champion life, is possible no matter where they're at, no matter what they've been through, right? Which is absolutely incredible. So what I want to do is I want to dive right in, man, to really, because I know we got a lot of stuff to cover. I want to make sure we get to everything. So real quick, just share a little bit about yourself, Travis, as far as family, who you are, and then we'll dig right into some of the questions that we want to get into.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Travis Barnes, father, franchisor, husband, speaker, author, so many things going on in my life, but just blessed, most importantly, blessed. Even when I think I'm broken, I'm really getting blessed. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that today. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of backstory that has, been a part of your journey, to get you where you're at today. And so I want to dive right in, man, because you have an incredible story. You are a true overcomer. I know that that's your podcast name. You've got a massive bus, with it all over it. And, I want to talk about, how did a guy like you do 10 years in prison, man? Like, that is something that when I think about that, still to this day, after knowing you, it blows my mind. So if you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about that story and how did you get to that point in your life?
Well, Kurt, thank you. It's funny. The correctional officers used to say that to me, the ones that were guarding me and keep me in there. They'd be like, Barnes, you really don't belong here. And I'd be like, well, could you tell somebody and let me out? But the truth is, I did belong there, right? Because what happened was I was a kid growing up in a broken home. And as I went through life, I was one of those kids that really didn't have that fatherly influence, that lighthouse that you sometimes need in your life to kind of have that anchor of, what direction should I go? Somebody to maybe help you a little bit more with your moral compass of who you should be as a man. So I was easily influenced. And I got my first job at the Gold's Gym in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1996. Small town boy goes to a 24-hour city. And I honestly didn't know what a wild life it would be even at the Gold's Gym. I mean, it was pretty crazy. There was a lot of drug usage going on, even amongst certain bodybuilders and, other people that were just coming to the gym. And I wound up having a roommate that was heavily into drugs, and I got into drugs, and it began a downward spiral where I eventually drove into the middle of a federal investigation, and it cost me a decade of my life, 10 years of my life. Yeah, terrible stuff. But it all happened when I mentioned that broken home. I think that identity is a big issue, right? Like, I didn't really have an identity. I was looking for love and acceptance that maybe I didn't get growing up as a kid from my father. And it came from sometimes maybe an older male role model that wasn't such a role model, right? It was just somebody that I started hanging out with, and I wanted his acceptance. And so I was willing to compromise myself to get it. And along the way, you find things like addiction that also make you compromise yourself. And that's what got me there.
Man, that's incredible. So 10 years in prison. Now, I see sometimes where people go in to prison and it's a breeding ground sometimes for many people to literally coming out, and it's a life of, continued crime and dysfunction and, all kinds of things. For you, what was that 10 years in prison for you? What did you learn? What did 10 years in prison teach you?
Yeah. Well, I took a different path. Robert Frost says I took the road less traveled and it made all the difference, right? For me, it's very common actually in prison for them to give you medications to even keep you sedated. And they wanted to do that with me early on. The correctional officers would come by my cell and I was just up at all hours. I actually took this car ride 2 weeks before I found out that I was going to have a baby. So I didn't even know that my daughter was going to be born when I was making mistakes that would cost me to not be there for the first 10 years of her life. So I had a lot of torture going on in my soul and my heart, and it would keep me awake at all hours. And so they decided that they were going to give me some medicine to sleep. They kid around in prison. They call it the Thorazine shuffle that a lot of inmates are doing. And I decided I was going to refuse that. And they said, "Oh, well, you can get in trouble for that." And I said, "Well, ma'am, I think I'm already in enough trouble. So, whatever other trouble I got, I think I'll be fine, But I decided right then and there that, I wasn't going to have drugs in my life anymore. And I was going to try to do something different. And I'll tell you, even despite all that kind of decision, I was still a tortured heart and soul. And when it came down that I was going to, be in prison for 188 months is what I was originally sentenced to. Now that's 15 years, 8 months. So we can talk a little bit about how I managed to get out in less than 10. But when that came down, I had to question, I had to say, can I really do that amount of time? I mean, my daughter's going to be driving a vehicle by the time I get home, you say, maybe they'd be better off without me, And I remember, going back to my cell one night and thinking, maybe I should just hang this up, maybe I should just quit and maybe they'd be better off. And right then and there, after a little bit of contemplation, I said to myself, Travis, it's time for you to stop being a selfish asshole. Right? Like, excuse my language, but this is the truth, right? I said, you've been so selfish for so long, caught up in your addiction, making choices that were all about you and your addiction. And now you're going to make another choice that's all about you, that's going to harm everybody else. I said, if your daughter, only comes here to just get some advice, at 10 years old or whatever age she's going to come and need to talk to that father. And even if it's through glass, you owe your family that, even if it's for one conversation that you stick around, you owe it. So I said, oof. It was good advice. I think it must have been coming from, maybe my spirit, the higher self, that God piece that we get inside ourselves, the Holy Spirit, and I said, okay. So then if I'm going to do this, then I got to be the best husband. I got to be the best father. I got to be the best person I can be from in here. And so that's when I started writing letters home every day. I drew the face of the pumpkin for Halloween. I'd draw a treasure map for Easter. I'd have color pictures through the mail. I decided I was going to educate myself, and I also decided I was going to stay out of trouble. That's where this question began, which was, you get involved in different things in prison, but I was the guy that was just in my bunk reading a book or exercising or helping other people exercise. And as I moved on to prisons that had more opportunity, I helped people get their GED and things like that, because I said, I want to do something that I can be proud of and that they can be proud of. And so that's how I handle it.
Man, that is incredible. One of the things that, as you were speaking, what I'm hearing is mindset. That direction of focus that you chose every single day, that you had a choice to make, right? When you were in what I like to call the dark soul of the night, moments, right? Where it's like, hey man, how many people do you know that go into a difficult situation in life, especially prison, and they don't come out? because they choose to end it. They choose, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in prison. How many people today that choose, suicide, they look at, I always say suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that's not the desire, that's not the route, right? No matter if you had 10 years, 15 years, or for many times when we deal with something that happens in our life, in our marriage, in our business, and it's like we have a bad week. And sometimes we're just like, what is going on, right? So you mentioned, that there must have been something speaking to you, helping you through this process. So I am curious, man, how was your faith developed? Were you already a man of faith before you went into prison? And if not, or if so, how did it develop as you were spending, that 10 years in there?
I was not. I'm going to tell you that I went to Catholic school growing up, and I've always had a little bit of church in my life, but I was not the spiritual person that I am today, which came as a result of prison. And I think that God's been trying to talk to me my whole life. And I think if your listeners think about it, maybe they'll identify with parts of my story and say, yeah, maybe God's been trying to speak to me too. I mean, even in that Gold's Gym, I went up to Lee Haney, and he was training Evander Holyfield for moving up from cruiserweight to heavyweight. And I said, I was more into bodybuilding at the time, so I wanted Lee Haney's autograph. And I said, Lee Haney, can I get your autograph? And he said, sure. And he signed it, and he signed it Lee Haney, but then he had Matthew on there. And then I thought he put like a date or something, I didn't know what it was. And it was Matthew 5:14-16. And I later looked it up, and it says, you're the light of the world, and I'm supposed to let my light shine, and I'm like, okay. And then it's funny because now I'm in the first place I was in, I was locked down 23 and a half hours a day. I was only let out for a 10-minute phone call and let out for a shower. And you had to do those things kind of quick. And so the book cart would come by. And at the time, I was not a reader. I mean, now I believe that leaders are readers, and I'm reading all the time. But back then, I was not a reader. And this book cart comes by, and he says, would you like a book? And I'm like, well, what do you got? And he says, well, I got Louis L'Amour and I got the Bible. I thought about it. I was like, oh, all right, I'll take Louis L'Amour. And so I think that God was like, I'm trying to talk to you right now. I got you alone and you're reading Louis L'Amour, And after I got through the Louis L'Amour series, I started reading the Bible. And it's funny how there were parts of that Bible that really spoke to me in ways to where I realized, like Joseph, coat of many colors, kind of had a good life that he was, maybe taken for granted, but he needed to be humbled before he could be exalted. Right. And I connected with that. I said, well, here I am in my humbling, just like Joseph was in a prison, Jonah getting caught up in the belly of the whale. He was going the wrong way in life, not the way God wanted him to go. So had a whale swallow him up and actually spit him up on the shore pretty close to where he was supposed to be. Right. And I was like, okay, maybe you're doing this for me, God. And as I went through my time, miraculous things happened. They said that my big goal, the first miraculous thing that happened was actually I was sentenced to 188 months, and I had to appeal that. Now, a very small percentage of people actually get an appeal. It's about 5%. And of those, only 5% ever actually have a positive result. And I had to wait a couple years for my appeal. And I would wait on it and I would pray on it. And when I went back and I got back 5 years, 8 months of my life, that was maybe the first intervention, that I felt like, wow, something really special happened here. Mm. And I originally was sentenced to too much time to go to a minimum security prison. And I heard that minimum security prisons are places where you get furloughs and you get to go home and see your family, right? Like, you could go home for the holiday. And I thought, how great, because it gets me a little emotional to talk about it. But at the time, my daughter was growing up. Now she's getting into elementary school, and she was in a Catholic school, and other people had to take her to a father-daughter dance. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be great if I could take her to a father-daughter dance? Maybe I could earn my way to a minimum security place and get that furlough. And so I finally get my way to a camp after winning an appeal and having the amount of time that they think is, appropriate to be in a place like that. And I show up there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go find out where I go apply for this furlough thing. And They said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't given anything like that in 5 years. There's been too much contraband coming in this place." And man, I was crushed because, like, I was working my way there the whole time, and I'm like, and so I just kept praying about it. And then the administration changed. There was a new warden. And I went to that warden and I said, instead of being a taker, maybe be a giver. Like, I've been a model inmate my whole time. I've spoken troubled youth programs. I've mentored people for their GED. I've done all these things. Like, maybe we should show people what they could get if they do the right things instead, and she kind of liked my thinking, but then I told her what I had in mind. And I said, because I'd like to get a furlough and I'd like to take my daughter to a father-daughter dance. And she goes, "Mr. Barnes, we cannot approve you just to go to a recital." I said, "Well, it's not a recital, it's a father-daughter dance." And she said, "Don't you understand what I'm saying?" She says, "Don't you have some sort of sick relative or something you might like to visit?" Then I knew I was getting somewhere. I'm like, oh, she's giving me the angle to write to her about. And I mean, over the course of 10 years, I lost a nephew and I had grandparents that were having heart attacks and on the edge of, passing on to the next life and that kind of thing. So I did. I wrote it back, and I don't know if there's ever been anybody since, but I was the first one to get a furlough in 5 years. And I don't know if anybody's gotten one since, but I can tell you that it made me think of the Bible where, like, God makes a way where there is no way. Right? Moses kind of shows up and there's water and, like, what are we going to do? There's soldiers behind us and, like, doors open that weren't supposed to open. And they opened for me at a time to take my daughter to a father-daughter dance. And I had 24 hours. I had 24 hours. And man, I'll tell you what, we lived all 24. I did not sleep. The fathers at that dance, and this is a great one for the listeners. The fathers at that dance were encouraging me to sit down, and they didn't know what I meant, but I said, "Oh, you don't understand. I only got tonight." And, Kurt, how much better would we be if we all only thought that we had tonight? That was a really important lesson in my life, and I need to take it to heart even more so nowadays when life gets busy, because I behaved in a way that everybody should behave every day, and so, I had a lot of reasons to believe in God throughout that time, because there were divine interventions that I just can't explain any other way.
Man, dude, I remember the first time that you told me that story in that diner, brother, and just tears coming down my eyes, man, and just thinking, because it's so easy to take for granted, the little things like being able to see our kids every single day, come home from school, and just the little things. And for you to say, hey, listen, that 24 hours was like the time of your life. It meant so much to you, man. So that's incredible, man. So, well, you go through this eventually, this is 10 years of your life, man, so now, I'm curious, man, now you come home and, you've been, 10 years away, and now all of a sudden, like, what's it like when you come home and then all of a sudden, man, you get into this fitness industry, right? Like you weren't always just a franchisor with your own franchise and all this stuff. So what's that transition like to coming home and then launching into your own fitness business?
Oh, the transition was crazy. Like, first of all, when my wife picked me up, by the way, cell phones got a whole lot smaller. Like, when we were kids, the only one that had a cell phone was like a real estate agent, and he carried it like a lunchbox or something, right? And so it was big, right? It had a big antenna coming off the top and all that kind of thing. But then they got small and smaller. They went to flip phones, to little phones. When my wife picked me up, and I hadn't seen one of these things in 10 years, actually, when I went in, a beeper was still a popular thing, right? And so she hands me the phone and says, "Hey, your dad would like to talk to you." And so I got this little phone that doesn't stretch from my ear to my mouth. And so I'm taking it back and forth. I'm like, listening with my ear, and then I'm trying to bring it down to my mouth and talking back and forth and like all that. She's like, "You can just hold it. It's okay," And then we stop at a rest stop so I can use the bathroom. Automatic flushes became a big thing. Like, I had to wave at the toilet to get it to flush. Then I go to the soap dispenser, and I guess it wasn't a pump handle. It was a catch tray. I pulled the tray right off the dang thing. I was a mess, right? And she was picking me up from prison to take me to a halfway house. And here's how it went for me to get into the fitness industry. I had been training people for tunas and stamps. If there was an opportunity to teach fitness wherever I went, I did. I taught adult continuing education on how to become a certified coach. I taught adult continuing education on nutrition. So I knew what I wanted to do. But here's how it works at a halfway house. Halfway house says, here's what you have to do, Travis. If you get a job, we'll give you permission to start going home on the weekends. When you go home on the weekends, you also have to look for a job there. If you get a job there, then we'll let you move home. So I said, okay, deal. So I asked somebody at the halfway house, I said, where's the fastest place for me to get a job? I've been waiting to go home a long time, this 10 years in the making, And so they said, oh, you get a job, this laundry. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll go to a laundry and get a job. That sounds fine, So I go to this laundry and my job was to pull laundry from the washer, stuff it in the dryer, and I got this guy yelling over my shoulder, hurry up, but don't drop anything. And I mean, that was just like kind of like the start of my life. So then I start to get traveling home. I'm traveling home and I find a job. I find that this place is going to give me a chance to be a trainer in their gym. And I was so excited because, Kurt, when you come out and you're a felon of 10 years and you don't got any job history and you're like, will anybody want to hire me? I got this stain on my life. I got this scarlet letter to carry. And so they did hire me. And so then I go back to the halfway house and I'm like, hey, I got this job. Does this mean I can move home? They said, oh, about that. We've decided that your city is too far from our halfway house to supervise you. So we need you to quit that job and just, stay with something closer to here.
Wow.
And I said, you don't understand. I said, I'm not from a metropolis like that. I'm from a small rural area. I said, there's not a lot of opportunities in my town. I said, this is like a real functioning gym where I could grow and be the manager and, maybe do some things there. So, well, Barnes, if you want to take the chance, here's how it works. I said, if you're ever a minute late getting back, then we'll send you back to prison, but you could keep that job and take that risk and, winter's coming. I was like, oh man, this is a lot. But I know something, Kurt. I said, I think every great dream is going to be tested. I think every great dream will be tested. And so I said, okay, I'm going to keep the job. And if I'm a minute late, you guys can send me back. I had such a good wife. And I still have a great wife, but back then she was packing my lunches and putting in the car so that I could run out the door after my work was done and not waste a minute trying to drive back to this place. And I would pray. I was like, God, I hope this snow just holds off until I get out of this place. And it was a really interesting year because it didn't really snow in November and it didn't really snow in December. And I was let out just after January. And the biggest snowfall happened on the day that I was let out. I mean, there were cars spinning off the ramps and stuff. I was like, God, I should have asked for one extra day, but you really jumped on this day, It was amazing. It was another time that I really saw God because I was able to pull that off. And just so you know, and this is for all the champion listeners out there, my commute was an hour and a half each way. My pay back then, we had gas back then that was about the same cost as it is now, maybe a bit more. And my pay was just going completely to gas. I mean, I still wasn't much of a help to my family yet, but I was trying to hang on to a job for the future. And I was able to hang on to it. In fact, I was getting promoted to manager by the time I was leaving the halfway house. And I was eventually moved up to chief operations officer for that company that I chose to take that chance on. So. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible. Just what you had to literally go through. I always say, any situation, God does not just have us go through it, but He has us grow through it, right? And so now take us into how do we go from that to actually starting this fitness business?
Yeah. So I come home and, I did work my way up to manager and chief operations officer. So finally going to give my family a home of their own because they've been living with my mom and, staying with other family members and doing different things. And they haven't had a home of their own, but I got a decent salary now. So I get us a home of our own. And within a month, we hadn't even made our first mortgage payment. That home was flooded to the second floor. So just because you think your troubles are over, there's always going to be more coming, right? There's always going to be more coming. I'm like, God, can I get a break? I already did 10 years in prison. Now I got a home that looks like a submarine, like what can we do? And so I get that home that's flooded to the second floor. We get this place into a FEMA trailer. I'm still working for the company, but for some reason, the owner's heart becomes hardened. and, biblically, sometimes hearts are hardened so that miracles can happen, and he decides that he'd like to have a different vision for his company. He'd like to have his company without me. That's a nice way to say I got fired. Well, boy, man, when I got fired, Kurt, again, I got an awesome wife. It looked like Dorothy Boyd from Jerry Maguire, because everybody's like, this guy's putting in 100 hours a week for this organization. And he's an ex-con, how is he going to take it, right? Is he going to be something that we need to be afraid of? And I'm not that guy, they didn't have to worry about things like that. But I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. Who's coming with me? The only one that was coming with me was Cindy, my wife, took her whistle off from around her neck right at that moment. We walk out that door together, and it's like, well, what are we going to do? And so we became traveling trainers. We're on an unemployment check. We're living in a FEMA trailer. We're traveling trainers. And my father calls me about this lady that he's going to church with. And this lady owns a salon, and she has this adjoining space that she thinks we should come check out. We should come check out her space. And, she thinks that we should have a gym there. And I said, Dad, did you tell this lady that I'm on an unemployment check living in a FEMA trailer? I don't even know why she would want to give me the time of day, but he was persistent. And so I said, well, what would it hurt to, go to church with him and just, stop by afterwards and then tell the lady our situation. And then we'll all go on with our lives, because she'll determine I'm not a good candidate. Right. And so we show up there, and I'll tell you, Kurt, I've never seen a salon like it. There's Christian quotes on the wall, and there's Christian music playing, and she's just so on fire for God. And so first we see her salon, and then she takes us to the adjoining space, and she's like, oh, and you could do this over here, and you could do this over here. And so I'm like, ma'am, you have a very nice space. I don't know if my father's told you, but I'm on an unemployment check. I'm living in a FEMA trailer. So if we ever have more resources, I'll reach out. How's that sound? And she said, I don't care about any of that. All I know is that God told me that you're supposed to be here. When are you moving in? I looked at Cindy. We went outside and talked about it. And I said, what are you thinking? She said, I think that lady thinks God's telling her that we're supposed to start a fitness business in her location. And so began Journey Fitness. We started in April of 2013, and we started with these people that believed in us, that were kind enough to give us a couple months free rent. We started with a high interest loan for minimal amounts of equipment. We had newspaper advertising on credit. That's what began Journey Fitness. And we grew to 5 locations in 4 years. So that was pretty good.
Man, that is incredible. So you go, from this story of literally traveling, 90 minutes both ways, right? Risking, if I'm a minute late, I'm going back to prison. But what I see is just a focused, determined person that, has a goal in mind, right? And it's just like, hey, if there's a will, there's a way, right? Like that's what I just hear, you saying is just whatever it takes. To now all of a sudden, God just opens a door, right? That's one of my favorite, verses is that all things are possible with God. Like you just, any goal that we think about setting, there's naturally going to be that doubt that will eventually, begin to start coming in. And we have to be able to fight that doubt, right? And that's one of my favorite verses is just, hey, look, all things are possible with God. Doesn't matter what it is. Here you are, you guys are on an unemployment check, living in a trailer, and you got this dream, and he just opens up this building, literally divine alignment, right? I always say God will create the alignment for the assignment. So you guys go there in a very short period of time from January 2013, you kick this thing off. Now you go to 4 or 5 locations. Now all of a sudden, tell me about, because that's a big step from going from maybe an owner of the businesses to becoming a franchisor, right? Like where you're starting a franchise. So, tell me like what made you decide to take that, path?
Yeah, Kurt, I would have actually stayed with that owner that gave me my first chance, because I'm an extremely loyal person. I think you've learned that about me, that if I have a relationship with somebody, that really means the most to me. So I would have stayed opening up locations for him. But because I had gotten good at opening up locations, I understood what systems meant. That owner wanted me to read certain books and do certain things. And I was, as you say, very driven, so I was happy to take all the notes I could and systemize his business for him. And so it seemed like a very simple step for me to open up multiple locations for myself, and I think maybe obviously that was God's intention, right? And so I started opening up multiple locations for myself, and people start coming to me and saying, hey, Travis, when we go to your other locations, the same things are happening there, but you're not there. You should be a franchise. And I'm like, oh, well, that's something to think about. And enough people said it. We were approached a few different times. They did a study on us and all that kind of thing. And so finally, one person came that was a member. His name was Mark Stemmerman. He owned a ski resort at the time and had another supply company. And he wanted to invest in the idea. And so he's actually a franchise partner today. But he said, you really should be doing this. You don't belong just here. You should really spread your message. And so we decided to do it. And Kurt, God showed up again. I feel like I've been getting signs all the way back to Lee Haney that, hey, I'm here with you. Even like those footprints in the sand, even when you think you're doing it all on your own, you're not. I'm carrying you. And so we decide that we're going to become a franchise. Now, the most important thing about a franchise is that you're going to trademark your name and your systems. Okay. And so what we found out is that somebody in Hawaii had trademarked the name Journey Fitness. So I'm like, geez, well, that's a problem. They're asking us to rename our business if we're going to be a franchise. That's like renaming your baby. Like I wouldn't want to. I have a daughter named Destiny. Somebody came along and told me, hey, you just got to rename your kid to move forward. I'd be like, wait a second, her name's Destiny. So we kept trying to keep the name Journey. And we're working with this franchise attorney. And I was saying to Cindy, I'd always run every idea by her. And so I said, Cindy, we're more than fitness. We're fitness, coaching, and nutrition. And she's like, yeah, but that's a long name, Journey Fitness, Coaching, and Nutrition. And I'm like, okay. So I started thinking about all these different threes. And so I started saying, well, maybe we'll shorten it up and call ourselves like Journey Trinity. And she's like, too religious. And I'm like, how about Journey Trifecta? And she's like, sounds like a racing company. And I'm like, how about Journey like 3X, like 3X your journey? She's like, a triple X club owned by an ex-con? That doesn't sound right, And so, so then I was like thinking and understanding that there's 110 fitness, giving 110%, 212 fitness, giving the extra degree. I said, how about Journey 333? And so I contacted the attorney. I said, I'm feeling good about this 333. It's kind of like journeys on the mountain. The 333 symbolizes what we do: fitness, coaching, and nutrition, mind, body, spirit, helping people look better, live better, feel better, And I said, what do you think? And he said, well, the initial search looks good. I think we might be able to do that. Let me look into it a little bit further. So he's Googling. So I realized maybe I should Google something. So I Google 333. And man, if you Google that, guess what you find? God shows up. He says, you're seeing this number because God wants to be a co-creator with you in the universe. I'm like, he does. That's great. God and I are partnering together again. And so then I go to breakfast with a friend of mine. He's a Christian guy. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this name, Journey 333. What do you think about that number? And he says, oh, well, Travis, did you know that was God's phone number? I said, stop messing with me. I said, if I knew God had a phone number, I would have called him a long time ago because, I'm trying to figure out some stuff. He says, no, there's these T-shirts that sometimes some Christians have, and they advertise a Jeremiah 333, where it says, call on me and I'll answer. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I like that. That gives me another good confirmation. And so then I decided to call the attorney back, and I said to the attorney, I said, hey, I'm feeling really good about this. Are we going to be able to make this work? And he said, well, we are going to make it work. And I think you should get a main number that ends in 333. And that's when the hairs on my arm stood up, and I was like, got a chill down my spine. I said, oh my God, we've had that phone number since we started. Our phone number has been 607-735-0333 since we started. Wow. So is there a plan for your life? I believe that there is. I believe that there is. I think that we're all created just the same way that we have, brown hair and brown eyes or blue eyes or whatever the case might be. I think that God puts certain passions and enthusiasms in our heart. In fact, ethosiasm, it comes from the Greek. It means the God within. And so I realized that God gave me a passion for fitness at a young age. And as many opportunities as he could, he showed me that he was right there with me. And if I was willing to be humbled, if I was willing to train people for tunas and stamps, he would help me to be exalted later on, where maybe I could even help spread a business model that impacted communities. So I can see all the way through my prison sentence where I felt protected at different times, and coming home and getting the job and, starting Journey Fitness with a landlord like that, and then starting a franchise and getting the confirmation that said, yep, this is another step that we're taking together. It's been awesome.
And Travis, the verse, and I have a backstory that you and I have talked about with, when I went through those darkest nights of the soul, going through mercury poisoning, years ago. And after 2.5 years of every test you could think of, being called crazy on every medication, literally on the verge of suicide, God brought me to that verse, Jeremiah 33:3. Because I was seeking, right? And it was like, but I was seeking all the wrong things, right? Like, go to this doctor, ask this person for their opinion, do this, do that, where it's like, how often do we do that? How often do we turn to everybody else but the one that matters most? And that verse, I love it. It says, call to me, seek me, and I will answer you unsearchable things. And it's actually the license plate that I have on my Corvette. It means that much to me. There's so many things that I could choose. And as I was going through, what do I want on this car? It's that, because that's what I want people to see, not a flashy car, because people don't understand that dream that when I started selling cars, when I was 19 years old for a Chevy dealership, fresh out of high school, when I didn't graduate, and I got into this car sales gig, right? And I saw that car every day, and I'm like, man, someday I'm going to have that car. And, it's through wisdom each and every day, asking God to help me as a leader in my business and all these different things that provided the finances, right, to have a vehicle like that. But that Jeremiah 33:3 is so powerful, man. So I want to ask you this, because, this year, really getting to, partner with you, partner with Journey Fitness, with, my company, Gym Growth Experts. That is what has built, in my mind, just an incredible friendship. You've inspired me to finish the book that I just got done writing, to take action on some certain things. And as we talk about, right, more scripture here, Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And that's what I see you doing every single day, in your businesses and in the speaking, in the different things that you're working on. So, here's the question, man. What's next for Journey? Because, I see what's happening, behind the scenes as a personal relationship. But for you, what's that vision? What's that next step? Because if somebody's listening to this podcast, I want to share with you right now, you have an incredible brand. You are a true servant leader that is setting people up for success in the fitness business. So what's that vision? What's that goal for where are we going with Journey Fitness? What's next, brother?
Wow. Great question. Great word too, vision, right? That's what's required of us as leaders. And so I had to get crystal clear on that. And so I've determined that Journey's going to have 1,000 locations. And it's because I know what that truly means. It's going to be 5,000 to 8,000 coaches, because there's 5 to 8 in each location, 5,000 to 8,000, or an army of coaches waking up every day to go change lives, And so here's what will happen. That with 1,000 locations, eventually 1,000 people will run through each location, and that'll be 1 million lives changed. If the average weight loss is only 10 pounds, that'll be 10 million pounds of weight loss. And you and I know as fitness professionals that just a 5% reduction in body weight is enough to change somebody's vitals. If I change their vitals, I get them off medication. And therefore, I have people living longer, healthier, happier lives just because we exist. We can truly honor what we say when we say that we add years to people's life and life to people's years. So Journey will continue to differentiate. We will continue to lead rather than follow, look for opportunities to keep on adding more for our members. But that is the growth plan. That's the growth plan.
Let's go. That excites me, man. That excites me. So Travis, real quick, before I ask you our last question, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Journey Fitness? If maybe they're in the fitness space, they're looking at, hey, I'm thinking about, starting, a business. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Journey Fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to www.journeyfitness333.com. And if you just want to connect with me personally, Facebook is the best place for me. I'm just Travis Barnes on Facebook. I am Travis Barnes with the 333 on Instagram, but I'll tell you guys, I'm just not great at my social media game. And since I'm a little bit older, I'm more on Facebook, yeah, best place.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, dude, this has been so incredible to spend some time with you. I so appreciate you taking the time, pouring into people. Man, I hope if you're listening to this or you're watching this, you've been inspired, right? And inspired is to live in spirit. So, we call this podcast, the champion life, Travis, because really that's my mission here, is to help people, live a life of abundance and freedom and victory where they're winning in every single area of their life, right? Whether that's in their faith, that's in their fitness, family, finances. So my last question for you is, what does living a champion life mean to you?
Yeah, I love the name of your podcast and what you're doing with your book and what you're doing to mentor other men. It takes me back to a time, I think I was about 14 years old, and I saw one of these t-shirts. I used to always be a sucker for the t-shirts that had sayings on them. And it said, a champion is someone who gets up even when they can't. Now that reminds me of like the Rocky movies. Like, what do we love about Rocky? We're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy's getting up again, right? Like, I mean, we just love to see Rocky get beat up so much and still keep coming back. So a champion is someone who never gives up and who rises up and inspires others by the way that they keep on rising, right? Isn't it a good man that will, you can know the Bible verse probably a little bit better than me, but a good man is going to fall, 7 times, but gets up, right? Like, it's all about getting up one more time than you've been knocked down, in the words of the motivational poet Chumbawamba, right? We get knocked down, but we get up again, right? That's how that goes.
Absolutely. No, man, that's incredible. Well, I would encourage you, man, check out Travis, check out Journey Fitness, man. They're doing some incredible things in the fitness industry. And if you just want to follow good people, Travis is one of those guys, where, one of the things that I live is in the abundance world, right? Where if you can get around people, whether it's virtually or whether it's in person, the more better people that you can get around, I believe that is the key. That is foundational to taking your life to the next level. So, man, you definitely have sharpened me. I like to think that I have sharpened you, brother.
You sure have, man. For sure.
It's been incredible watching, you grow, getting to know you, watching, Journey. So, man, I'm so grateful. I'm thankful for the time, man. I'm going to just continue to, see blessings upon your life, upon your business, upon your marriage, upon everything. And just know, man, that I'm continuing to root for you and to root for Journey, brother, for many, many years to come, man. So thank you so much for jumping on with me today, dude.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the honor of being on this show. Thank you.
You got it, dude.